Hello and welcome to the new series of Drishti IAS. I am Pooja Divedi, and in this segment today we are going to discuss about Israel-Palestine conflict. This topic is important from the perspective of prelims and also from the perspective of GS mains paper. So let's begin with the first ever topic, that is YN News. Now, according to this article, as you see, India is deeply concerned at escalating Israel-Palestine conflict. The unrest has been brewing since a long period of time, and now the heaviest aerial exchange, the attack, has been seen since the year 2014 between Palestine and Israel. So, if we talk about the disturbed area, this is Israel. It is bordered with Egypt, Jordan, and of course Syria and Lebanon. So, Israel is facing problems, and Palestine is facing problems, and the Gaza region, the Gaza Strip, is also facing problems here. Now, if we talk about the entire issue, the conflict is that on this Monday, Israeli armed forces stormed the Al Aqsa Mosque, which is a holy site for both Muslims and Jews, in the Haram el Sharif in Jerusalem, ahead of a march by Zionist nationalists. Now, Zionism is both a nationalist movement and an ideology. Zionism is an ideology to have a holy land for Jews, which is having sympathy and support from the entire globe. So this all happened between the march of the Zionist nationalists. Now, in retaliation to that, Hamas, which actually controls the Gaza Strip, Hamas controls the Gaza Strip, and the Islamist militant group it fired dozens of rockets on Israel. Now, the Israelis launched an airstrike on Gaza in response. So, they launched a rocket or air attack on Israel, and so Israel also did the same in response to it. And that is why it is being said that it is the heaviest aerial exchange since the year 2014. It killed at least 21 Palestinians, including 9 children. Why? Because the threatened eviction of dozens of Palestinian families in East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah escalated this crisis further in the last week of Ramzan. So because Israel wanted to drive away people from this particular region, that is why this entire issue has occurred. Moving on, when did it all happen? Tensions have been building up since the start of Ramzan in mid-April, and Israeli police set up barricades at the Damascus Gate outside the occupied Old City, preventing Palestinians from gathering there. And if we talk about the conflict of Sheikh Jarrah, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forced out of their homes when the state of Israel was created in the year 1948, right? And the Palestinians called it the event of Nakba or catastrophe. 28 of those Palestinian families moved to Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem to settle there. Now, by the early 1970s, Jewish agencies started demanding that the families leave the land. Jewish committees claimed that the houses sat on land they purchased in 1885 when Jews were migrating to historic Palestine that was part of the Ottoman Empire. And earlier this year, the Central Court in East Jerusalem upheld the decision to evict 4 Palestinian families from their homes in Sheikh Jarrah in favor of Jewish settlers. And the Israeli Supreme Court was also scheduled to hear this case on May 10th, but it was delayed because this issue remains unsolved and potentially inflammable. So, if we talk about the background of the entire conflict, in the year 1948, State of Israel declared Gaza belongs to Egypt. But in the year 1967, in the Six-Day War, Israel captures Gaza, and in the year 1982, Camp David Accords were signed between Egypt and Israel, where Gaza remained a part of Israel. Then from the year 1987, First Intifada was extended and Oslo Accords were signed between Israel and the PLO. Second Intifada, Israel withdraws from Gaza in 2005. And then after that, 2009, end of Operation Cast Lead occurred. Then, importantly, after that unrest was seen, the state still remains in the state of unrest. The region still remains in the state of unrest. And from the year 2014, we could see that Operation Protective Edge was in occurrence. And now, as we can see, the unrest is still escalating, and we need international pressure to create a pressure on both Israel and Palestine to calm down. And as you can see, the UN says that we are deeply concerned at the escalation of violence in occupied Palestine and East Jerusalem and Israel. We condemn all violence and all incitement to violence. No force should be used against those exercising their rights peacefully. Then, as you can see, according to this tweet, Ron Amalka, who is the Israeli ambassador to India, there has been a woman who has been killed in the entire exchanges of aerial attack and this is the condolence occurring. And also, Indian ambassador to Israel also spoke with the family of the deceased woman. Moving on, let's talk about Greta Thunberg's tweet, which it has been saying that Greta Thunberg is remaining silent or neutral, not silent. She's remaining neutral on this very important issue, which she shouldn't, because she has become a face of representation when it comes to the youth, the very young population of the entire globe. Moving on, as we can see, Israel and Hamas escalate deadly strike and US calls for calm. Moving on, if we talk about India's stand, India recognized Israel in 1950, but it is also the first non-Arab country to recognize Palestine Liberation Organization as the sole representative of Palestinian. India is also one of the first countries to recognize the statehood of Palestine in 1988, but after 2014, the de-hyphenation policy of the current government occurred, in which this particular policy is very unique in nature, in the sense that India decided that the relationship with Israel and relationship with Palestine will be de-hyphenated, in the sense that India will have an independent relationship with Israel on its own merits and with Palestine on its own merits, right? So India will not look at look at Israel or Palestine from the prism of their own unrest, their own conflict. And in the 2014, India favored UNHRC's resolution to probe Israel's human rights violation in Gaza. Despite supporting probe, India abstained from voting against Israel in UNHRC in 2015, and as a part of Link West policy, India has de-hyphenated its relationship with Israel. We have already talked about it. So this actually happened in the year 2018 to treat both the countries mutually independent and exclusive. In June 2019, India voted in favor of a decision introduced by Israel in the UN Economic and Social Council that objected to granting consultative status to Palestinian non-governmental organization. And so far, India has tried to maintain the image of its historical moral supporter for Palestinian self-determination, and at the same time to engage in the military, economic and other strategic relationship with Israel. Let's move on to our question. Analyze the evolving scenario regarding the recent conflict between Israel and Palestine. You have to discuss India's stand on the situation in 250 words. Okay? So that's it for today. Tomorrow we shall meet again with another segment.